WeenCast, a Ween podcast with Rory Gibbons and Shane Prutzky.
All right. Hey, what's up? This is Shane.
This is Rory.
And this is WeenCast. And we are going to go back in time tonight, and we are going to talk about a Ween show from our youth. This is actually going to be the second show that I attended. Rory, you didn't make it to this one. Is that true?
No, and unfortunately, I was not at this show. It's one of the shows that got away, and so I certainly regret not being there.
This is the second show that I had attended. It's January 30th, 1998, at the Trocadero in Philadelphia, which was a fucking badass show. There's a couple of things I'd like to talk about just before we get into talking about the show itself and you know the set list and everything. This show is sort of the first one that either of us attended that is readily available, meaning that you can listen to this show, the complete show, right now. The first show that we had seen was the 96 show at the Trocadero, which was them doing the country tour. And we had talked about it in the first episode of the show, the WeenCast podcast. That show is kind of lost in you know the Ween lore. There's no
lost in the mists
of
of time.
Right. There's no set list of it on Brown Base. You know, we have a recording of it that we don't know is the complete show, and the sound quality is pretty terrible. We don't know that it's the complete thing, or you know, if it's in the right order. But this show, 1:30:98. You can listen to the whole thing right now. You can listen to this on YouTube in a couple of different ways. You can listen to the complete thing in one long video, or you can listen to it in individual tracks broken up into a playlist. And we just want to thank the users. I'm on my iPad here as I'm talking, so bear with me a second. The complete show is uploaded by a user named Boognish Bachwinkle. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes. One long video, the complete show, which is awesome. And then there's a couple of different playlists of this that you can listen to the whole thing, both of which are uploaded by Boognish Monster. Boognish Monster is an awesome YouTuber who is doing God's work. This dude uploads a ton of shows, a ton of B-sides, and just tons and tons of Ween material, just hours and hours of fucking Ween material. So we want to thank both of those guys, but especially him. And this is really cool because this particular show was just redone as sort of a 20th anniversary. It's on YouTube. It's titled Ween Rocks the Troc, which is the shit, and that's exactly what they did that night. So it's like a new soundboard / audience mix, and it sounds awesome.
You know, it's interesting because I didn't even realize, it hadn't occurred to me that it was the 20th anniversary or around that time until you brought that up and earlier, and it just kind of blew my mind. It's just like, not only is that timely that gets released as an avenue to listen to the show and to have it out there for everyone, but also just, man, it's been 20 years.
Yeah, man, it's insane. I mean, same here. It didn't even dawn on me until I read that. If you go on Brown Tracker, you can download this. Like I said, that's a new mix of the show, and you can download it on Brown Tracker, or like I said, you can listen to it on YouTube. Ween rocks the Troc. So that's just really fucking cool. And it was a good recording. Like, I had a good recording of it from the get-go. It's the complete show. It sounds great. And it's a great example of the band and where they were at the time. This was the Mollusk tour. And the Mollusk had come out the previous summer. And let me see if I can get the date here. This was the second to last show on the Mollusk tour. This was Friday night, like I said, 1:30:98, and they did one other show after that, which was Boston. And those would be the last shows in 98 until that spring. So you got to think it's the end of January 98, and this was the end of the Mollusk tour, and then they wouldn't play again for another like 2-3 months. So that's pretty cool also.
Yeah, like the end of a big run as a 5-member band, rocking and rolling for a whole tour, and kind of second to last show is back on home turf, as it were.
Right. And you can tell when you listen to this, like if you just listen to the entire show with the crowd in between the tracks and them talking and stuff, you can tell that like Philly is fucking ready for this show.
And I think Ween was ready for the show as well.
Absolutely. Like they were on tour the whole fall and winter of 97 leading up to this. So they're fucking on it. They're, shit is firing on all cylinders for them. The shit is together. The shit is tight, right?
You got a raucous crowd. You got people cheering, adoration. At one point, Jeaner's yelling, Friday night. He's like, They're jacked up.
It's fucking, it's fucking Friday night. It's like all things have come together at this show. Like, it's fucking Friday night. People are in the mood to party. This is the first time that they sell out the Trocadero, which they mention a couple of times during the show. They say, we've never sold out at home before. They say it a couple of times, like, people everywhere. Oh, this is like a fucking rock show. And it kind of makes sense because the Mollusk had been out for a good, 6 months at this point, because it came out the previous summer of 97, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they haven't played Philly, so all the people who have come to see them that night, or, we assume most of them or whatever, have the Mollusk and have had long enough to know it, listen to it long enough, and know the songs. So when you listen to this, when they're introducing a song, if they're in between songs and they're getting ready to play something and they announce oh, this song is, the Golden Eel. It's even though that's a quote unquote new song at the time, the crowd fucking goes crazy because they know they know it all. They know all the new songs, which are all the fucking Mollusk songs.
And that contrasts immediately with, the last time they were at the Troc, or I think it was the last time, the show in 96. I remember that being sparsely populated. I remember that, so.
Right, absolutely. It's sort of like the opposite of that first show that we saw, which was October of 96 with the country band, and that was a fucking Sunday night. So it's like,
yes, it was.
So the odds were
right.
the odds were against it for that night. Whereas this this night, it's like everything, the stars have aligned for this.
Well,
night.
as Jeaner said, he said it's Friday night.
Right. He says that continuously, throughout the show.
Yeah, I think multiple times. But I do want to back up a little bit before we actually talk about the show. Because I always like to get a little bit of the details of, how you got the tickets, how you got to the show, why I wasn't there, things like that. Why didn't?
Well, why couldn't you make it to this one?
So I was in Penn State at the time, so to be honest, I don't think I really even have a very good excuse. Um, I feel like, maybe I just wasn't quite as hardcore into Ween maybe as you were, and you were down in Fleetwood, so you were, only an hour outside of town. And I was probably just being a broke college student. So use that as an excuse not to get down there. But sadly, I don't really have a very good excuse, and
Well,
I think that might be why I regret not going as much as I do,
no, dude. I
because
mean,
I look back and realize that there was no reason why I shouldn't have.
no. I mean, you're talking. You're at Penn State, Maine, which is a good. It's at least 2.5 hours from Philly. More than that, really.
Oh, it's more than that. It's more like 3.5. Really.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, it's and correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't have a car at the time. You didn't have your own car up at
No, that
Penn
is true.
State. So, I mean, you're definitely off the hook for that one. I mean, that's
Yeah, I mean, I was in the dorms. I was a freshman that year, but
right. You're in the
probably
dorms as a freshman with no car. What are you gonna do? I mean,
in the pre-cell phone, in the pre-smartphone era, I was probably daunted with the task of getting transportation to Philadelphia from State College.
Right. I mean, unless there was somebody that was coming from Penn State directly to this show, and like that was what you guys were gonna do that whole night. It just wouldn't have happened. And like you said,
Maybe I should have checked the bulletin board at the dorm. I don't know, but at any rate, so who went with you, and how'd you guys get down there, and then take me to the front door.
Right. So I don't think it's much of a story in terms of like how we got there. It was one car of people. Our friend Corey drove us
with a C or with a K.
With Corey with a C. Corey
okay.
with a C.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Drove his Honda. He had a little Honda.
The
Civic,
little,
Honda Civic.
It was black. He called it the Midge.
The Midge,
if I recall.
I think it was called the Midge. So he drove that, and it was me, him, our friends Mike, our friend Mark, and Corey's girlfriend at the time, Kristen. I'm 95% certain that's who went. That could be.
That's a packed car. That's a small vehicle.
Yeah.
That's a two-door hatchback.
For a Honda Civic, yeah, that's enough people. That's definitely, yeah.
Yeah, rumbling down to Chinatown.
But I do have to say, I think it was pretty uneventful. Like, I don't think we had any problems. Like, I remember when we went down for that 96 show and parking in that little parking lot, like, next to the Troc or, a couple of buildings down and being all nervous and, scared because we're teenagers and whatnot. And for this show, like, I don't really remember there being any problems. We took that car, and I don't remember if we parked in that lot, but we probably did. And, made it there and back in one piece, and it was all good. There was an opening band that played that night. I think they were called Fisherman's Wharf.
Okay.
Other than that, I couldn't tell you anything about them. I don't know if anything ever became of them. That they were playing when we got there. Like, they were already, on when we, like, walked in.
Yeah, unfortunately, you never know what you're going to get with the opening band.
Right.
Not as good as Do-Rag then.
Right. I mean, you can't expect to have Do-Rag open for Ween every time. It would be fucking amazing. But no, this was just some band of, like alternative rockers or whatever. It's like, okay, and a Ween crowd is gonna be tough on an opening band, and these guys got no love whatsoever. So I don't know whatever happened to them, but.
All right, so now we're on the floor. Do you remember where you were standing? How was the crowd?
That's an excellent question, because that's one of the other things that I wanted to mention. Philadelphia is always a good crowd and is ready to get rowdy. I specifically remember, like, in any of like the upbeat numbers or like any of like the punk rock songs, the crowd was totally like into it, and the crowd, you know, like a mosh pit will just break out in Philadelphia, no problem, every fucking time. I mean,
well, and there's definitely a few little like mini jams, you know, little medleys kind of thrown into the show. So that's something we'll get to when we start talking about the actual songs.
Right. And like I said, you know, this was the first time they sold out the Trocadero.
Wow.
Anyone who's listened to this who's never been, that's a pretty small place. Probably about 1,000 people when it's all said and done. Maybe a little bit less than that, 800, something around there. Would you say that sounds right?
I wonder if that's even a high estimate, to be honest. It's been a little while since I've been to the Troc, admittedly.
I'd say like.
I wonder if it's even way less than that. I always had the impression a few hundred people could fit in there.
I kind of remember seeing signs.
Maybe not with upstairs too. I mean.
Yeah, I kind of remember seeing signs when we were there that said like maximum occupancy like 850. I don't
Fair
know.
enough.
You know, I've been there, you know, maybe 6-7 times, you know, my whole life, and for whatever reason, 800 something sticks out in my mind.
Well, you might know better than I, so I'll go with that number.
But yeah, let's just say between, you know, 500 and 800 people in that place. That's a pretty nice crowd, and I think we were to the left side of the stage. Which is where I always sort of gravitated towards for whatever reason. There's
like facing the stage, like to the left.
Yeah, right. Like
as a fan's direction.
Right, exactly.
Gotcha.
If you were on stage, it would be stage right.
Yeah, so that's kind of where we were for the first show too, I believe.
Right. And I think for the first show, we sort of got down onto the floor and, you know, as far up as we could. And I think we did that a couple of times during this show as well. But we sort of like. You know, we sort of camped out to that left side.
A little hung back a little.
Yeah. So that's a good spot. At least it was back then. At the Troc.
Nice.
And should we read the set list?
Yeah. Let me read down the list, and then we can kind of go back through. And you're the one that was there, so I'm really excited to get your input.
Yeah, man.
On what was going on. So they opened with Dancing in the Show Tonight, Take Me Away, Don't Get Too Close to My Fantasy, What Diener Was Talking About, The Golden Eel, Waving My Dick in the Wind, Sketches of Winkle, Dr. Rock, Pony, Buckingham Green, AIDS, Voodoo Lady, Frank, The Mollusk, Spinal Meningitis, Pumpin' for the Man, Nan, Puerto Rican Power, I Can't Put My Finger on It, A Tear for Eddie, Ocean Man, Tick, You Fucked Up, Mr. Richard Smoker, Blarney Stone, Baby Bitch, Tender Situation, Buenas Tardes, Amigo, and Hot for Teacher.
Fucking right. That's a badass set list, man.
Yeah, my initial impression is like that's a badass set list. And one of the first things I also noticed is that it is almost exclusively chocolate and cheese and the Mollusk.
Right. Well, I mean, that would make sense because it's the Mollusk tour.
Yeah, well, certainly it's the Mollusk tour. I think part of that also connects to, we're talking a little bit about the time when that time period in the career of Ween, them just coming into having, the 5-piece band, going on tour for the Mollusk first time. I think it really informs you. Look at a set list like that and you think like, that makes a lot of sense, I think, to go with the Mollusk and chocolate and cheese. And you don't see a lot of the only one Golden Country Great song, if I'm looking at it right. And just a smattering of the other items.
Right.
So a badass set list, but it's interesting kind of how it plays out, like the song selection.
And it's kind of like a contrast for us because the last show before this that we had been to, like we said, was the '96 show, and it was the country band, the country players were with them, and
Yeah.
this is the first time that you really got a sense of this is the band that it would become and it would remain until today, 20 years.
Yeah, I feel like there's a few songs as we go down the set list that there's some jams and some different things that when I'm hearing it on this, I'm just thinking things like, wow, this is like one of the first times they would have done that.
Yeah.
There's some jams that I felt like were a little different than the way I'm used to hearing them more recently. And I'm just thinking like, wow, the songs have evolved over time. It's like a different stage or a different era of Ween. And so the music reflects that. The formation of the 5-member band, but this is also this is pre White Pepper, La Cucaracha, like all that is like way into the future. Like this still strikes me as just kind of like, a little more old school.
Oh yeah, totally, man, totally. And yeah, it's like, this is a show that's heavy in the mollusk and chocolate and cheese because that was the stuff that was like fresh at the time. But I really think what stands out when you go back and you listen to this show is some of the older songs that they now have fleshed out with the whole band. Sketches of Winkle, Dr. Rock.
Don't get too close to my fantasy.
Right. Frank.
Dr. Rock is fantastic in this show. I thought it was just they were just ripping, and it was just like had an awesome like spacey jam component and stuff. I think it was really tight.
Just like all of those old school songs from like God, Ween, Satan and the Pod and Pure Guava that are now like being played live as a 5-piece band. And like we were saying, at this point in their career, they had just been on tour for almost the whole year of '97, and like even those songs, as like quote unquote simple as they might sound like on the albums, like they're fully fleshed out fucking rockin' tunes. By the time this show comes around.
And I think one of the things that I get from this show is there's like a freshness to a lot of the music that I think comes out to the because if they're sort of earlier in the evolution of that band, the 5-piece, that they're sort of the music's fresher to them as a group as they're exploring how they're developing the songs with all those people, right? So
and even some of like the we're talking about the older songs like. Basically everything that they played, this night, the crowd is into, and the crowd cheers at the beginning of the song and the end of the song. Like if Aaron announces like, okay, don't get too close to my fantasy, people cheer. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter like what song it is. It's like they want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So that encourages the band to like, yeah, fucking A, like crowd's into it, like we're into it, and just a fucking amazing set list, man. I'm trying to.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if you had any particular highlights that you wanted to touch on. There's definitely a couple songs that stand out to me. First off, Dancing in the Show Tonight as the opener is just, kind of has almost become like a classic thing. It's sort of like a perfect opener, but hearing it in this, like the context of the Mollusk just coming out, I think it's just fantastic. It like brings you right into this, like the Mollusk like album, and it's like you're in that. So the whole night is like immersed in the Mollusk, and it comes right off the top like that.
Right. Yeah, and I mean the Golden Eel, just a fucking amazing rendition, and it, the end is just rocked out. A couple
Buckingham Green, a song that for me is like one of the most epic components of like a Ween show, and I don't care how many times they play that, I just love it when they play it. Absolutely. And to think that this is like the early like formation of that, and it's just like brilliant Um,
You got you got some you got some things that would, like you were saying, would remain, like Voodoo Lady. So probably within a year, or maybe a year and a half before this show, it sort of like it started getting that, like, okay, it's the real, like, funky, like, the
yeah,
long intro. This one isn't too long. They've definitely done it longer, and I don't think this has like the talk box or anything in it, but it's definitely a nice long, like, intro and jam out. Same thing with Frank. It's like, so there's an example of, that song is from the Pod, and it's like, as simple as it might come across in the Pod, it's like you jam that fucker out for like 10 minutes. You know what I mean?
yeah. It's a good jam.
Yeah,
Frank's a good jam.
it's a great jam, and it's like, who saw that shit coming? You know what I mean? It's like just a awesome tune that they have brought to life. You know what I mean? It's like, it's something that sort of started out kind of simple, and it just goes to show that you put these guys together, and that's the kind of thing that they can create.
Yeah, one of the best parts of the show when listening to it, I gotta say, so you have like a little bit of like a power medley, Spinal Meningitis, Pumper for the Man, Nan, Puerto Rican Power, but then it goes into basically what's like an extended jam period of the show. I can't put my finger on it, and then Tear for Eddie, and for me that's like a highlight of the show. I mean, that I can't put my finger on it. Was like they doing the smoke and shit.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And so because obviously listening to it, he's got it's like got the crazy intro and the sort of chanting sort of thing, and like the mystical thing. So that I thought that was just brilliant. And again, like feeling fresh as a 5-piece band. Bear in mind, Chocolate and Cheese is at this point several years ago, right? I mean,
94. So it's 4 years old, right?
And then probably my favorite track of this show is probably Tear for Eddie.
Yeah, amazing rendition.
They have like this like subtle like guitar intro, the way of introducing the song, that I don't think I've ever heard it presented like that in any other thing that I've heard anyway. So I just thought that was really cool, and like what a great jam. It's a really good song.
Yeah, absolutely.
To hear it in a way different than I'm used to hearing it. Again, in a way that sounds fresh,
right.
But like having this like cool, like quieter, like subtle guitar intro. Because when I first heard it, I'm like, what is this? What song is this? And then it started into what I could recognize, and it was like, oh, this is a great,
right.
Tear for Eddie.
Yeah, beautiful rendition. One of the things I'll mention is Puerto Rican Power, which you have to sort of take it with a grain of salt nowadays, because it's like now it's just another tune. It's just another song that you can just look up Ween on YouTube, and you can find anything. But at the time, you really only had the studio albums, and the B-sides and the rarities, the rarer tracks, that's exactly what they were. They were rare. They were hard to find. Yeah, dude,
back in the day, those things were hard to get.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just you just go on your computer and you just listen to everything Ween's ever recorded. It's like, no, it's, you had, those albums, God, Ween, Satan, The Pod, Pure Guava, Chocolate and Cheese, and now, the Mollusk. And if something like Puerto Rican Power is played, it's like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, dude.
And it's like, that's kind of one of the things we take for granted nowadays, is like all those sort of like oddball tunes that aren't on their albums. It's like they're easy to find, they're easy to get, but back then it's like that was an oddball song. It's like that wasn't, that didn't exist on anything that we had heard. And, after this show is played and I had gotten the tapes, then we got to listen to the tapes, and, we got to know that song, and it's like, oh, I love fucking Puerto Rican Power, but at the time it's like, what the fuck is this, So, and it was it was a B-side. It was on one of the, I think it was a Chocolate and Cheese EP, or maybe it was from Pure Guava EP, which, you know, again, back in the days before eBay, those things were hard to find, you know, and you got the little 4-song EP with like 2 songs from the album and 2-3 songs that were just weird tunes that, you know, didn't make it on the album, you know. So it's a fucking great jam, and it's a great song, but it's just one of those things that it jumps out at me. Is like, okay, that's you know, it's a B-side. You know, it's like when B-sides were still a thing, you know. But yeah, I mean, just a great set list, and it's like, it's one of those shows. I think I said this about the New York show that we went to a couple years ago. Like, this is a great example of a set list where one or 2 or 3 of your favorite Ween songs are gonna be on here. It's like this show has something for everyone. It's got the, you know, the rockin' tunes, you know, the punk rock you know, edge to it. It's got the jams, you know, it's got some jams in there. It's got the spacey stuff. Can't put my finger on it. You know, Voodoo Lady. It's got the slow and folky stuff. Baby Bitch. You know, Tender Situation. You know, Buenos Tardes Amigos at the end.
That's a great one. That's a great solo
for the long, you know, show ender. Just a fucking amazing set list. I made a couple of notes. I brought up the Frank Jam, which was the shit.
Well, and don't forget they finished with Hot for Teacher.
And right, so and Hot for Teacher. How can you go wrong there? You know, I mean, and you know, there again, it's like a Ween cover. Like Ween does a cover of, you know, like what, you know.
I always find covers to be almost like a window into the soul.
Oh, right.
You know, because fans don't play a lot of covers; they just play a few. So you just pay attention to which ones they choose to play.
Right. I mean, the covers that Ween chooses, they have a way of making their own anyway. You know, so.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves, but that's another show that's coming up.
Yeah, we'll continue on that road. But anyway, so I just made a couple of notes about some of the things that they bring up in between the songs and stuff. At the beginning of the show, after Take Me Away, there's a couple of quotes back and forth between Jeaner and Diener, where Jeaner is trying to shake people's hands, and he's trying to, you know, to give people high fives and stuff, and he says, "Can't reach." And then Diener says, "What's the deal with the barricade? That's pretty horrible. Whose idea was that?" And that's because this is the first time Ween has played at the Troc since they had put up, it's like one of those gates, it's like one of those guardrails, like in front of the stage. So like when we were there for the 96 show, and I think I was at a couple of shows in between these two Ween shows, you could just get right up, like right at the stage. You could literally put your body like right onto the front of the stage. So then they had added like a one of those guard things that, you know, like a couple of security guards can stand there in between that little gap in between the stage and that little guardrail. I mean, it's kind of common to see, you know, nowadays, but before that, you could just go right up and literally, you know, touch the stage. So this was the first show Ween played where there's a gap in between, you know, the stage and the crowd there. So that's what they're referring to. After Golden Eel, they do a little Dixieland tease. I don't know if you listen to that. Just somehow it just starts off on the piano. So that's cool. They throw that in there.
Glenn getting saucy.
This is like one of my favorite quotes of like any of the Ween shows that I had recordings of, you know, back in these days. After Dr. Rock, before Mr. Would You Please Help My Pony, Junior is talking and he's like, you know, it's Friday night. He goes, I'm feeling good. And when I'm feeling good, there's only one song I like to do. And he pauses for a second and he just goes, and it's Mr. Would you please help my pony, and the crowd just goes crazy. That was always one of my favorite lines, like, spoken in between songs.
It's fantastic.
Of any of the recordings that I had. What else?
That's way better than Jeaner constantly saying, "Thank you, we're Ween."
Yeah, right. We're Ween. Yeah.
Thank you, we're Ween.
And
Friday night.
after Can't Put My Finger on It, Aaron mentions, "Oh, we got wigs. Where's my wig?" Because someone had threw a wig up on stage, and it was basically like the same kind of wig as like Diener's hair, just like a moppy, like black-haired wig. And Diener puts it on, and Jeaner's just like, "Yeah, it looks just like your hair anyway." And Diener's like, "Fuck you." Like, is that what my hair looks like? Because someone just threw up a fucking wig, and that's what they're talking about. After you mentioned Tear for Eddie, Jeaner's mom came out just to wave to the crowd. Like, they're I think it's Claude says something like, "Oh yeah, like Jeaner's mom, like, let's get her out of here." And then she just walked out. Like, I remember there's a nice older lady that just walked out for a second, and Jeaner's like, "My mom, ladies and gentlemen." And she just waves and like hugs Aaron, and then just walks back off and waves, and it's like, was that really his mom? Like, well, we assume,
That's great.
Yeah, it was awesome, and so that was cool. After Baby Bitch, they do the Neil Young tease. Did you pick up on that? Come a little.
Wait, I'm
bit
sorry. Which one?
closer. They do a little Neil Young tease after Baby Bitch. So in between Baby Bitch and Tender Situation, you have to listen to that. You have to listen to that piece.
Okay.
And the last note that I had, Tender Situation, if you're paying attention, it's like one of the only songs where Aaron does vocals and then Diener picks up and he does vocals. So it's like, if you stop and think about it, there aren't too many songs that are like that. It's like it's either Aaron or it's Diener, and
yeah,
that's like that's an example of like, you got Jeaner who like starts it and then it goes over to Diener. It's sort of like it's either one or the other, or the two of them together. But that tune is like they switch. Jeaner.
Oh, and what a great song too.
Oh my God, amazing. So yeah, man, that's pretty much all the notes that I had made.
Yeah, dude, I think it's a shame I couldn't go, but I'm glad that you were able to participate. And yeah, it's just such a good list of songs, and I some of the ways they play some of the songs, it's just great. It's just a really good show. You can't find too much wrong with it.
Absolutely.
And I like how the show contrasts with the '96 show that we had seen. When you think about in the context of what Ween was at that time, I think this show is really informative.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like we were saying, it's crazy to think that this is sort of the era where the 5-piece band that Ween would become up until now is really like formed. I mean, they were the 5 guys probably the whole year of '97, and then like when you start going before that, it's like it's a little sketchy there. It's like, I think it was those 5 guys when they were doing the country tour plus the country band, and then you start going before that, and it's like, I don't know. I don't know who's on bass, and like, was Glenn part of the band before that? It's like, that's when it starts getting a little like sketchy. That's when they were really just putting it together. But like, by the time this show happens and that Mollusk tour, it's the 5 of them, and it's all put together. You know what I mean? It's all coming together. Everything is shit is firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, and also as far as our history with Ween and Ween shows. So this is kind of number two on the list, and then we don't go to another show for until January of '99, and then by then though that then triggers a series where we start going to a lot more Ween shows.
Oh
We go
yeah,
start going to shows more frequently. So this show is still at a place where for us where we hadn't seen a lot of live Ween yet, and where the band is as a 5-piece, and then over the next few years as we start to go to more and more shows, it just becomes who Ween is.
absolutely, absolutely.
No.
Yeah, I mean, for for our own history, we had brought up on the first episode that we grew up living about an hour and a half west of Philadelphia, and there really wasn't a lot of opportunities to go see live music at all. Where we lived, and a band like this, it's like Philly was the closest that.
Oh, you definitely had to go to Philly. I mean,
Yeah, right, right. There just wasn't the kind. It just wasn't the kind of area that a lot of stuff came to, and yeah, you had to go to Philly, and when you're a teenage kid, and maybe one of your friends has the car or whatever, and there's
in a
not
way
that
that
much
makes
money
me
to go around. It's like you got to pick and choose.
in a way that makes me proud that we got to the first show in '96, just because that was right around that when we first started driving.
Oh, absolutely, definitely, man.
It's like we couldn't have gone to a show before then without a vehicle.
Right, right. And like we were saying, '97, they didn't play Philly. I mean, you go down the list of shows on Brown Base, and they started off in America in the spring and summer, and then they continued the tour in Australia and then England, and did like a European tour. And it wasn't until January of '98, which is when we're talking about, that they came back and played a few American shows.
Yeah.
So this was the first time really since that '96 show that we even had an opportunity to see them at all. And you're absolutely right. It's like after this is when we were really like, we got to see this band as often as we can. If we have to start traveling to, to see them, we're going to,
Yeah, well, if I recall, the next show is in fact at the Trocadero that we see, but then indeed we do start traveling,
Right.
which we get to.
Right. One other thing I'll bring up about this show is I did get a shirt. I think the people in our group of friends that got shirts were me and our friend Mike, which was you could either get the black or the white shirt. So like mine was the black shirt with just the round Boognish on the front. What do they call that when it's just a little thing like up by your chest, like to one side? I don't know if there's a name for that.
Shoot. I can't think of that right now.
But you know what I mean. It just has it's not in the center. It's off to the side, and it's just like one. Yeah. So it's just the Boognish on the front, and then the back has the big Boognish, and it says underneath it the Ween the Mollusk tour. And I don't even think it says 97, 90. I don't even think it says when it is. It just says Ween the Mollusk tour. There's no dates. It's just the Boognish head and that. So
no cities listed, no dates, just
no dates.
Yeah, nice.
Just the fact that it was Ween the Mollusk tour, so you could get that in either the black or the white, and it was like flip flop.
Some good lo-fi shit.
Yeah, right. So I think I got the black version, and Mike got the white version of those shirts, and I still have it. I think it kind of still fits, actually.
That's crazy.
Believe it or not, I think that one actually does still fit okay. So
I
yeah.
mean, you may need to put it on and take a picture for Twitter or something.
Oh, fucking A, right. So yeah, man. So that was this show. I strongly encourage anyone who might be listening to this to listen to this fucking concert, man. I mean, the
January 30th, 1998.
January 30th, 98. And the before we started recording this, we were just talking about how the internet and YouTube especially has just made it so easy. Back in the days of this show, I got a cassette tape that someone was nice enough to make me and actually put in a package and mail to me. Two cassette tapes. One complete tape, and then the second tape was like a half hour or so.
Some dude was putting the tape and inserting the tape into a tape deck, flipping the tape deck.
Yeah, totally, man.
Like breaking the little tabs off it or something.
Right. Somehow he got a copy of it, and then he made he was making copies or whatever, and it's like there's just there's there's so much less work involved, and if you're not tech savvy enough to go on to Brown Tracker and download the actual files, to your computer and then play them on your iTunes or whatever, just YouTube it. It's like you can't get any easier than that, So
it's ubiquitous.
Yeah, listen to this fucking show and enjoy.
Yeah, I agree. I concur.
So I think that probably wraps up this episode. You mentioned Twitter, and if anyone has anything that they want to say, if they want to tell one of their stories, it's at WeenCastpodcast.
Yeah, if you want to add to something about the show, maybe we said something that you thought was inaccurate, chime in. Let us know your thoughts.
Please do. Yeah, if you were at the show, we'd love to hear your story. So you want to add anything else, Rory?
I think I'm good, man. Okay. Peace, everybody.
All right.
Have a great night.
Thank you so much for listening.
Later.